very much for having me here. The work that the center has been doing for a decade and a half or so is to transform higher education and focused on higher education because in higher education the students are engaged in an inquiry that is abstracted from a sense of meaning that they've been provided for by their own homes, parents, guardians, and are developing a kind of sense of meaning on their own inside the web of the social constructions and the constructions of their own families. But they begin a kind of quasi-independence. Many students, unfortunately, have an independence far earlier than that, in areas where they are challenged very early with a sense of their own trying to find meaning, but it's very difficult to do so developmentally before adolescence, let's say. So the center is aware of the uses of, let's say, contemplative practices or introspective practices or other kinds of first-person practices throughout one's lifetime. You know, for say programs that could address kindergartners or first graders, fourth graders, and so forth, K through 12. And it's not as if we, in our emphasis in higher education, would say that it's more important there or less important. It's the area we've chosen to concentrate on because what we're interested in doing is cultivating the environments in which we and our students engage in an inquiry as to what's deeply meaningful. So that learning becomes a challenge and development of that sense of meaning. And then the information that's provided can be integrated into a kind of a first-person inquiry such that that individual can live out in the world in alignment with that meaning. So the basic, to give away the talk in a kind of sense, is that contemplative practices, I believe, are a mode for that inquiry and that sustaining sense of living out a life of meaning as articulated by the student, him or herself. So it's not my job to download meaning to you, but to create an environment in which we can collectively examine our own sense of meaning and be challenged in that sense of meaning by others who have different senses of meaning, who have had different opportunities. So the way in which we can examine, our sense of upbringing, our sense of privilege, or our sense of constraints, our biases. We do that best in community because it's difficult for us to introspect fully as to what our own intentions are. We might have a very deep and profound sense of ourselves. That doesn't mean we have full sense of ourselves. And psychological studies have shown the kind of the bounded sense of our own awareness and the inability to discern everything that you're doing in real time. And one of the ways which we can really live in a way consistently in line with our meaning is being surrounded by others who support our sense of meaning, who say, Dan, what was that? What were you doing when you were doing that? What do you mean? Oh, Carrie will say, in that last talk, you didn't mention this, or you didn't even mention, you didn't use this, you only use these examples. Why did you do that? Good question. Take a look. So that these environments, these structures here, are not just to download information. So I didn't come here simply to take some information and just kind of download it to you. Because you wouldn't need me here. We wouldn't need to be together. Why have a residential college? Why have a residential college if all you're being brought together to do is have some brainiac give you a bunch of information. So that's the idea of the contemplative practice is that this is it's necessarily a first-person inquiry. It's necessitated as a first-person inquiry because it's an inquiry into meaning. So without a sense of first-person inquiry, all you can do is you have somebody, a second person, telling you what to do, or a third-person inquiry as if, let's see what Kant told me what to do. Kant's pretty smart. He writes, I can hardly understand what he's saying, so he must be right. Turns out that's not always the case. Smart people can often be very dangerous people. And if you haven't found that out, you should. So in some way, this is about the future of higher education. The future of higher education is in the intention today. What's the future of higher education? You start looking at, let's think about technology, and let's think about this, and let's think about that. Okay, that's one thing. Real question is, what is our intention for what is education? What is the vision? And that vision today will shape the nature of education ongoingly. Yes, it will be expressed in ways we can't even imagine now, or maybe you can, I cannot. But the real question is, what are we doing in these environments? And what are we cultivating? And so, in some ways, this is an odd group to talk to because, I expected to be in a little more hostile environment. This maybe you are hostile. So so if you could, maybe so I've seen some of the faces, and so in some ways, the first part of this might be like, yeah, we know all this, okay? So let me just say, to the folks out there in digital land, there are many people who've said they cannot be here tonight, and want me to give the talk so that they can watch it later filmed. So in some ways, I'll be talking to not you, and you might wonder, why are you not talking to us and we're sitting right in front of you? Well, the reason is I'm also talking to other people in my imagined future. Which might never occur, I understand, but I have a belief that will occur. So I'm trying to do these two things at once. So let me just give you a kind of prefatory remark on my sense of the state of higher education and what we can do about it. So let me just give you some. And so let's play a little game. And this game is, imagine who said what I'm about to put on. Now, if you know this, please do not shout it out, okay? And if you know this, I'm very impressed. Let me just say, already. Okay? There's no more deadly harm can be done to young minds than by the depreciation of the present. The present contains all there is. It is holy ground. Education in its present phase suffers from a lack of definite aim, and from an external machinery which kills its vitality. Alfred Lord Whitehead. I nearly fell out of my chair flipping backwards when I read this by Alfred. If you know this, this is one of the just serious demigods of symbolic logic, right? He and Russell write the ground of symbolic logic. As you well know, mathematician major right here. So Whitehead is writing in 1917. So this is not something that's kind of fringe. The basic problem has been recognized really far before, of course, you can take this far before Whitehead. So this notion of something, this is really, Whitehead was a careful guy. I don't know if you know anybody who does, logical positivism or symbolic logic, but these critters are very, very careful. They don't just throw words around. So what he's saying is holy ground. He's saying something very special there. Bless you. He is linking the sense of vitality, education, and knowledge to a sense of the holy. And by holy, of course, I come here to Syracuse and I'm in an academic institution saying the word holy. It's like, oh my gosh, somebody, that should be a net that falls. And say, I don't think it's allowed. You can't say that word. Now, of course, this is something, what he really means here is what I just talked about with sense of meaning. A sense of deep and meaning that's expressed through action. This is what Aristotle was talking about, Seneca was talking about in their concept of virtue, right? This is a sense of alignment with one's nature, however conceived, action in alignment with that virtue. This is I will use the word ancient tradition. So this is not some kind of fringe lunatic group that's just come up with this stuff in the last couple of years out of a sense of their retreats that they went on 2 weeks ago. It is something that's actually very, very significant. And the implications of this work, I think, are even more significant. Harry Lewis, who many of you might know, Dean of Harvard College, computer scientist, who was actually asked to write the mission of Harvard, because Harvard didn't have a mission. Because Harvard's mission was just to be Harvard. We're Harvard. Like, what's your mission? Oh, didn't you hear what I just said? We're Harvard. That's our mission, to be Harvard. Thank you very much. So there he is. That's a happy looking guy. Universities, and I know you can read. I know that. I don't usually use PowerPoints, so they kind of excite me. And I do like reading this myself out loud because it's just so powerful. Universities have forgotten their larger educational role for college students. Look, again, Harry Lewis is a careful guy. Universities have forgotten. It's not as if they never knew. They've forgotten what the nature of education, what is the ground of education? The ground of education is a life lived well. It is what your mission statements say. Living out lives of meaning. I don't know what Syracuse's is. You probably have something like that, right? To live lives of purpose or something like that. And you say, wow, what does that mean, teacher? They'll say, I don't know. I never read the mission statement. I'm just teaching algebra. Like, no, you're not. No, you're not. We've forgotten that this institution is built so we can live together in society, in a society that is meaningful, for well-being in the most beautiful sense. It is not a training simply to fit into a system of gears. It is not a cog factory to hone the little spindles of cogs such that they can turn effortlessly in the machine. It, of course, is to create a sense of value added so individuals can live out in the world in a meaningful way with careers and have an actualization of control and making a difference in the world by action. It is certainly about action. But it has nothing to do with a phrase that is so pejorative, like, it's academic. It's academic. I'm 53 years old. I started, teaching. I was 28. Spent most of my life doing something that the culture would reduce to not only meaninglessness, but trivial meaninglessness. It's academic. And it's our own fault. Because we have forgot why it is we ask students to be very careful with the language. To notice that he says forgotten. That matters. Because there's implications to that. The discernment of that matters. The discernment of, using certain phrases rather than others. Exclude some individuals, include other individuals. That matters. It matters because we want to live lives of meaning. That's why. So he goes on. They succeed better than ever as creators and repositories of knowledge. Who could deny that? Oh my gosh, right? I mean, you're interested in, the war of the Austrian secession. Whoop, you can just look it up, but you can, Wikipedia it. So the getting knowledge, unbelievably easy. I had to replace some RAM in my computer. I didn't know how to do it. I called the place that, the local computer place. They said, we can charge you $200. That seemed like, I don't think so. So I looked up on YouTube, and Maxwell 99.1 or something like that had put up a video, how do you replace your RAM? Very kindly, step by step, followed it, perfect, no problem. If we're going to just be, a narrow sense of technique, we don't need you. We don't need you. And this is something, of course, that's well known. This is not to be too conspiratorial, but that's clear. An education that's only narrow vocational training is not that expensive. Now that the good news, of course, is then we have more access. And that's how it's being sold right now, right? More access in the world. There's a cool part about that, right? There's no doubt about that. But the trade-offs are significant. The trade-offs are significant, and I'm here to talk about those trade-offs. And then, of course, this is the trade-off. I mean, very few people came to academia to just teach someone how to do social art. You didn't probably just spend all those hours so that individuals could make a little structure for them to sit in and look at the sky. That's what my life's goal has been, to make this little thing that that somebody can hang on and it's fire resistant and somebody can look at the sky. I doubt that. You probably wanted to do something more like this, and we can do that. And the ground from which this begins is listening to our own students, to place them back at the center of their own education through the means of a first-person inquiry. So they can see in their own first person how the information they're receiving relates to their own sense of meaning. Now this is Parker Palmer, and I will not read this. I'll allow you to read this. Y'all know Parker Palmer? Okay, just so you kind of channel Parker Palmer for a while. You know what I mean? Just kind of Parker Palmer. He's and then he wrote this in 2013. That's this year. For those of you not paying attention. The consequences of providing our students merely with information are profound. Students at this institution will, this coming weekend, be taken to the hospital for drinking themselves nearly to death. There will be women who will be sexually assaulted. There will be people who live in fear of being assaulted. And I say, this world can be different. And it only begins with a very difficult look at where we begin. And I believe that with this group of people, this group of people here, this institution, thousands, literally thousands of them, it is our job to train these students, yes, in music, in architecture, in the complexities of Beethoven, in the complexities of drawing, in the complexities of mathematics, in the complexities of psychology, of course, but not just that. It is to instill also in our students a sense that every action they take cultivates something. And for them to begin to ask themselves, what is this act cultivating? For whom is it cultivating? And what is it that I want to cultivate in the world? So that when they learn engineering, when they learn to write well, when they learn whatever they're learning, they think about, what are the implications of this? What are the implications of this technology that's changing plant genetics? You think, who cares about plant genetics? Have you ever heard of Monsanto? If you think about drone technology, unbelievably cool. Fantastic. Beautiful. Yet, the consequences of our unwillingness to bring into the classroom our own students' sense of meaning and have them begin to build and exercise a sense of discernment about that meaning and the implications in the world are, quite frankly, horrifying. So this is what I think education can be. Education can be. Think about people interested in social justice. It's like if let's put our hands up, who's interested in social justice? Like, you're like me? No. I'm a no. Not really. Don't care about social justice. So of course you wouldn't say that. But then what do we do? How do we activate that in our lives through our own disciplines and in action in our lives? Those are two very different things often. And to sit with that, to be with that, to exercise a sense of that, to begin to just take a look at, unearned privilege. You start saying unearned privileges, and everybody starts going, oh, no, not one of these guys again, make me feel bad all the time. You know what I mean? Like, oh, man, I have enough of that now. I don't want to talk about unearned privilege because, damn it, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about something. I thought you were going to talk about something nice, like contemplative practices. Going to sit and, chant or something like that, which is a nice thing to do. But recognizing where we sit and what we sit with, so that we can meet another human being, meet them in the eyeballs, with the difficulty of where we begin, is the first step to meeting someone. And this can be the ground. I teach in economics. You might say, well, that's probably, if you're teaching a class on social justice, that sounds fine. I teach economics. You think economics has anything to do with social justice? If you don't, take a moment. Just take a moment and kind of let that roll around for a while. Maybe later tonight, you'll think of something. This can be educative, transformative in the sense that our students have these aha moments. It's what we live for. I was just talking to someone today who was saying, she said one aha moment keeps me going for a month. I'm so busy. But just one aha moment. It is transformative. You see someone transform. And that's what that aha moment can be built into, not just the aha moment about something abstract, but about one's life and how that abstraction sits in this life and acts out in the world. And we can, through this sense of discernment, through this first-person inquiry, really build the ground to ask, how is this accessible or inaccessible to certain groups of people? How do we think about groups of people? Them, us, other, self. We're individuals sitting in a web of a systemic system that is lopsided. It's a racist system. It's a sexist system. It's got all sorts of homophobic elements. It's unequal. You can't suddenly just say I've transcended that, because you are sitting in a web of all of that. So how do we sit with ourselves in this web in a meaningful way, so that we can construct ways in which we can meet one another in the web, but not be overwhelmed by the web? This is that sense of quaking. How can we be fully a sense of like we're all one, while living in a racist world? We're not ready for we're all one. That's kind of like we're all one. It's like, I don't think so, Chief. I don't think that's easy for you to say, white guy, 53 years old. No, we're all one. That's all done. I've taken these classes, and it turns out we're all one. It's like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that, Ace. So that, how do we do that? How do we hold a real beautiful sense of being completely united and yet separate? How do we do this? And that's what we can do in our classes. We can cultivate the means of dealing with contradiction, about how to integrate learning into a sense of meaning. And these practices, which I will give it like, okay, get to them. These practices can do that. That's what they are fundamentally about. They're fundamentally about all these that I was speaking about. So these practices do these things. They are wholly open and inclusive because they're human practices. It's really weird to be suddenly up here. I wish I should be behind this. Like the I could be like Oz. I can speak behind here. This is such a cool moment. This is a egomaniac's position right now. I feel like I'm about 20 feet tall. You're like little Lilliputians, I could like listen to me. So, we can. This is inclusive because this has no sense of particular tradition. This is not from the ground of Buddhism. This is not from the ground of Christianity. This is not from the ground of neuroscience. These are human practices that are aimed at developing a sense of first-person inquiry. And the means of first-person inquiry can be somatic, they could be mental, they could be introspection, they could be all sorts of different things, which I'll give you lots of examples of. So these are human practices. And they can be fostered by a sense of listening to different groups of people from different cultures, from different places on the web, so that we can find out what are the ways in which that first-person inquiry is most powerful for these individuals. They're not the same for all people. So again, the cultivation of action. Think about it. Students are in classes only a couple hours a day. They sleep a couple hours. You guys don't sleep very much. But you need to sleep some. The rest of the time, where are they? Who knows? They're all over the place. They're in their residence halls. They're in the library. They're in their fraternities, sororities. They're at the gym. They're at this, they're that. 100 hours a week or so. They're not in classes, nor are they sleeping. In a residential institution, that time is curricular. There is no such thing as an extracurricular activity. Every action cultivates something. Every single thought cultivates something. If you think negative thoughts, you will cultivate negativity. This is simple. If you act in ways that are negative to yourself and to others, you will cultivate negativity. So, in an institution where you have tens of, how many students in this institution? 13,000. I was going to tens of thousands. Thousands and thousands. Thousands and thousands. 13,000. Think of it. There's an awesome opportunity for the staff, administration, the faculty, residential hall monitors, cafeteria, everybody working together in a common vision for students to start to live out lives of meaning here. Not one day. Here. Together. In a community. Why in a community? Well, are you kidding me? To live out your life in meaning, in community or not in community, very different things. What are we trying to do? We're trying to live out our lives as human beings. We're, sometimes some individuals, think about the individuals who go off and live alone. They cultivate a relationship with normally something either like the Desert Fathers with their conception of God, right? That movement away from human beings was still a cultivation of a relationship. And with each other. The Desert Fathers, for example, worked with each other. They wrote for each other. That's why we know their writings. They wrote. Why would they write? Because they wanted connection with each other. But they were cultivating something different. What are our students cultivating? They're cultivating a way to live in the world. What kind of world? A social world. Well, let's start that here. What is it to live in a social world? What is it to live in a residential hall? How is your dorm living cultivating what you want to cultivate in this world? How is your eating cultivating what you want to cultivate in this world? How is your gym practice? Your walking across the campus? The nature of the grounds, the way the grounds are kept here. Why are there all these lawns everywhere that no one walks on? Really cool. You guys do not walk on the grass here. I really spend a lot of time watching you guys. You stay on the sidewalks. You guys are very well behaved. Like, what is that about? You guys really like lawns, apparently. Got a lot of them, right? And one of the most, in terms of agricultural products in the United States, lawns. People harvest lawns. They call it mowing. They cultivate, they plant lawns, they fertilize lawns. It's one of the major farm products in the United States. Lawns. Okay. No, you might think that's how we want it. We don't believe in food. We believe in lawns. I hear you. I think that's odd, but I hear you. That's what you want. I'm hearing you. I doubt that's what you think. You probably think food is probably important, especially on a planet in which a lot of people don't have food. So what are you doing? What are you doing with all these lawns? Well, I don't know. They're green. Leave us alone. Okay, I'll leave you alone. But I thought that, if you want to create a world in which there is meaning, what are you doing? What are we doing with our planet? What are we doing? And this is what, and I don't mean a kind of a radical sense. Seriously, I'm not joking. Maybe you love lawns. We love lawns. We want to protect these lawns. Don't walk on them. I will honor your lawns. But I doubt it. I doubt that, the student body would get together and say, lawns. Lawns over food. Maybe. But the point is, we should be inquiring. What are the foods? What's the food in your food? In your cafeterias? Not just because it's bad. Oh, the food, blah blah blah, it's bad. I'm not talking about that. What's its nature? From whence does it come? Is this what is it? What does that food cultivate? You see what I'm saying? So every action, you might say, oh my gosh, I'll go crazy. Okay, it's just 4 years, dude. 4 years of attention to what you cultivate. There are other individuals who've been doing that for their whole lifetimes. And so this is something to live out. And then to actually imagine having a sense of meaning. And when you move out in the world, you're ongoingly cultivating an awareness. Are you in alignment with that meaning? What paper am I using? How am I disposing of it? Where am I eating? What am I doing with the styrofoam? What is this? Just not in a kind of nerd. You might say that it sounds like a rumination of compulsive neurotic. That's why we don't do it, right? Leave me alone. I just want to I want to whistle in my dark. Thank you very much. No, because it turns out that ends in a culture in which people are obese, neurotic, depressed, unhappy, with more resources than humankind has ever known in history of our species. We've run that experiment. We have run that experiment. And the results are rather clear. And something else is possible. That's the good news. It's not just doom and gloom. There's something else. So all those beginning parts, kind of the doom and gloomy part. Now this is okay, let's do something. So we're talking about these tools. But check it out. If one of the things we're trying to examine is, what is most deeply meaningful to me, to you, we had better develop some exercises in which students examine that for themselves. What kind of exercises are those? Oh, contemplative exercises, right? Exercises that are first-person inquiries. They have to be first-person inquiries because the question is, what is deeply meaningful to you? I know, lawns, right? So, this is the deal, right? blah, blah, blah. I basically have this PowerPoint thing in case I freak out. So I can just kind of like stop and just kind of go through the PowerPoint, but I'm not too freaked out right now, so I can just kind of go on. I've already said all this stuff, basically, right? So, and I can give you this PowerPoint so you can put it on the website or whatever. So far, so good? Any questions so far? I mean, I'm going to talk about what do these look like, what can they do, and so forth. So I'm just kind of like trying to build up a kind of sense of like, what are these practices aimed at? What's the aim? Then I'll talk about what they are next. This is the aim, to rekindle a sense of meaning in education. What Whitehead at the beginning of the 20th century lamented, what Aristotle was talking about, what Seneca was talking about in Rome. And this is, you can go right through education as a sense of, to what end? To learn for what, right? To learn, to live out in the world with meaning. As defined by, so this is just a picture I took in British Columbia. It's really pretty. At this point, it needs some lightness, maybe a little bit. So this is James. He must have some absorbing errand, right? Something, to live something out. And check this out. Is living a life of meaning pleasurable? No. Because this is the point. This is the really cool point. It's hard. It hurts. It's painful. Yet it yields well-being. This is the kind of, it's not about an experience. It's not, if it were pleasurable in a short way, you'd probably just do it. Like a sea slug, moving away from an electric shock. They do that. You can train a sea slug, actually, which I've not done, but this I've been told because I wouldn't want to hurt the poor sea slug. But sea slugs are actually, you can train, put a probe near their little gill, and if you shock them a couple times, the next time the probe goes near their gill, they move away. That's us. We're complicated sea slugs. We move away from the electric shock toward the saccharin drip, the glucose drip. Way toward. And the point is here is like, forget the shock. Forget the drip. Question is this in alignment with my meaning? Sometimes it's very difficult, confronting, painful to live a life of meaning. But ultimately, that is the ground of well-being. That's what this is about. Notice, happiness is not a succession of little moments that are pleasure. Like how can I, this is the crazy thing. This is to read your Freud, right? Freud, like this is, what is the nature of pleasure? It's episodic. It's fleeting. If you want to construct a life just of pleasure, forget about it. Its nature is impermanent. Living out meaning, however, is not about the experience of that moment. It's being in alignment. Some errand, some greater errand that sometimes will be as hard as anything I've ever done, yet provides a ground for my well-being. And this distinction between experience for me and the ground of meaning is something we have to hold for our students, to try to model for our students, to live in ways that are in line with meaning, such that we're not just in line with our little particular pleasure. And of course, this is, the real sense of this are one. One. Whatever your beliefs of afterlife are, this particular manifestation will end. And of course, this is such, she's just so beautiful. I mean, tell me, what is it you plan to do? It's so different, right? As we sit here, what we plan to do. Oh my goodness. That's not often what we plan to do. It's not what we do. And that's not because we're irrational. It's because we have an out-of-control sense. we don't have the ability to ongoingly discern and live with our integrity. We don't. So, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The wildness and the oneness is its preciousness. That it is fleeting, that it will be gone, is its preciousness. And without some sense, without some integrated sense of what there is to live out, it will be gone. So that's the frame. And what we can cultivate is a deeper sense of this one precious and wild life. Wild because we can't even follow it sometimes. I mean, right now, this is like a weird dream I'm having. Right? It's kind of like this is like a dream I would totally have. Like it's pretty much an empty auditorium, and there's a couple of people sprinkled around, and there's somebody's filming it, and there's one guy way over there, and then there's like images I've seen all the time. The Carrie maid, and there she is sitting, with me, and we got to drive back to Amherst tonight. It's like this weird. It's weird. It's a wild life. This is wild, and like just to pay attention to this moment, how weird this is. Check it out. What are you doing with this is your one wild life. Of all that, you could be like in Hawaii right now, surfing or something like that. It's even I think you got 6 hours, right? It's like in the afternoon. Here we are, like what are we doing around all these lawns? Take a what? Surfing the no, you don't step on them. You're surfing the sidewalks. You gingerly walk on the sidewalks. These practices can develop a sense of like, what am I doing when I'm doing it? What am I doing while I'm doing something? That has to be cultivated. And in fact, even the cultivation of that is unknown to us. The experiments that have been done on introspection, they're given people, for example, they're famous studies in which they gave people pairs of words like moonlight, wave, starfish, shell, things like that, And then they asked. I take half of you and I give you those kinds of words, and I say, what kind of laundry detergent do you use? Tide. Swear. No, this is so much statistically. Tide comes up more often, and then this is the kicker. Then you ask people, I see that you like Tide. Could you tell me why? Oh, my mom always used Tide. I like its smell. It has an orange container, like my great university's colors, Oh my heavens. Not only were you manipulated to come up with Tide, but then when asked why you did that, you come up with a reason. And you think it's just an isolated study. No. They've also done studies where they put French wines at the end caps of liquor stores, and they play French music. More people, they sell a lot more. I can give you, if you're interested in it, these are done pretty carefully. People buy more of the French wine. Then they're coming out, they say, tell me why you bought the French wine. French have a very, delicate palate, and zabba, 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 zabba. And then, of course, when they put the Italian wine at the end and play the Italian music, out they come with the Italian wine. Why the Italian wine? Well, the Italians, they have a reason. We are unaware of what we're doing when we're doing it, and given that, people will manipulate us to their own ends. And I am the result of that. And my friends, as much as I care about you, so are you. So are you. So are we all. But we can unpack that. We can begin to unpack that. We can walk into a Target and watch them trying to drive me rightward. We can watch them drive me to this. They can watch me and my kids, as we go out. Like, what's at the cash register? What's right there in the grocery stores? Rutabagas? Turnips? No, dumb magazines, right? With like the people I'm supposed to be. That turns out I will never be. no matter what, products they want me to buy to bridge the gap between me and Brad Pitt, that's insurmountable. Candy. Why? Because you're fish. And they dangle something silver, and you will bite the thing. And I say, no. I say no. And we can do something about that. We can, with our students, examine our meaning, the information we're learning, and our actions such that we can have these human practices. Now notice that, notice that we're talking like, quiet in mind, silence, centering, retreats, we got storytelling, deep listening, bearing witness, work and volunteering, deep listening, reading. This is not meditative practices. Meditative practices are very important in my judgment. It's my own personal judgment. You might have others. You might have a somatic practice. You might have an art practice. You might have a music practice. You might have a walking practice. You might have a sitting practice, a singing practice, a whatever kind of practice. But the practices are designed to cultivate discernment inquiry and insight. And these are human forms of knowing. They're from every tradition. This is not somehow that, thank goodness for what we call the East, which is just funny. Like we go why is it East? Seems kind of West for here. Well, that come and when the first year students come, what's the first week called? Here, when the first, before the school starts and the first year students come, orientation. And then this is the best part. This is where I feel like I look and say, I know I'm alone on this planet. Because they'll have orientation. And they'll have a multicultural awareness session in orientation. Oh my goodness. Where did the orient, somebody in the middle of China would not orient themselves. My European friends in the middle of the 15th century, looking for the edge of the world. Orientation. Heavenly pumpkins. Even that word is not even unpacked in an academic institution. And this, you might say, I hate this political correctness. Just let me use the word. No, I won't let you use the word. You want to use the word? Okay, use the word. But be aware of what you're doing when you use the word. That's fine. You use word. I believe in free speech. But know what you're doing when you're doing the thing you're doing. Okay. So any questions so far? Okay. So for contemplative pedagogy, one of these traditions and these practices cultivate attention. And that seems like a good thing, right? I mean, in a world where we have, when I was in school, I doodled a lot. I didn't need an iPad. I didn't need a MacBook Pro to zone out. I could doodle. So, phasing out was always an opportunity for all of us. But the mechanisms of phasing out are far more thrilling today, I think, than they were in my day, and are very seductive. In fact, if you think about ancient practices in which magical powers were believed in, the people who were teachers in those traditions would warn their students, be very cautious of those magical powers because they're very seductive. For example, this is almost verbatim. The magical power of knowing what's happening on the other side of the world can be so seductive that you'll be lost and want to do it all the time. When I first read that, I thought, that's an iPad. I can look at AP News and finding out what's happening on the word. ancient tradition, recognizing that's a very, very seductive draw. Of course it is. But how can we train our students to focus not merely attention, because that's easy. Being attentive to that which you like, right? So when I'm saying things you like, it's like, ooh, say more. When I'm saying other stuff, like maybe like the orientation part, kind of like, God, am I tired? I don't like this. I'm boring, whatever. Like, oh, da da da. So like then suddenly it's like, oh, that's interesting. Do say more, So like it's not a question of attention. You're all attentive to what you like. The question is, can you be attentive to what you don't like, which has meaning? In other words, can you have emotional balance? Can you have emotional regulation? Not in a regulation in a kind of like regulate your meaning, your emotions away. No. But can you have some sort of sense of attending to that which you need to attend to? And that's what can be cultivated by these practices. So our students can attend. Oh, these students today can't pay attention. That's not true. My students can play video games for 6 hours in a row. And have you ever played those games? My son and I played a game once where he and I were little creatures, not creatures, they were kind of humanoids, in which we had implements of destruction. And the idea was to shoot our little, I was in control of one of them, and he was in control of the other one. And the idea was for him to take me out and for me to take him out. And I tried as best I could to kill him. I mean, his little creature. But he was so much better at it than I was that he adopted a kind of Cheyenne coup version of it. So the Cheyenne would, in battle, the greatest thing that Cheyenne could do is not kill someone, but tap them with a little stick and then ride away. And so what Sam would do to me, Sam, my son, is I'd be like looking for him, like trying to, like this. And he would run up behind me and like, hit me on the head, then run away. Before I would kind of turn, and he'd go, he's gone. And then he'd hit me he'd try to hit all my body parts, the head, and so forth. So he was unbelievably attentive. Really the question is attending to that which is difficult to attend to. And learning often is very difficult. This is not a consumer, this is not just doing what you like. Much of what we need to learn is difficult to learn, hard to learn. And learning to attend to that which is difficult takes a practice. And these contemplative practices can instill that in us. In addition, they can, like this emotional balance. So they can make us discern the difference between reactivity to what we want to react to and that which we don't want to react to. So when I'm driving, as I said earlier, I was talking to some people, a deer runs in front of the car, I immediately put on the brake. That's a kind of reactivity I want to cultivate, right? Other kinds of reactivity I actually don't want to cultivate, like certain kinds of notions about other human beings, racist notions, or notions about certain kinds of cultures or something like that, where I immediately have an association, but I can actually hold that and not act on it, or like anger arises, I can hold that and not act. Now that's different from getting rid of reactivity. Reactivity is in an evolutionary response to a very difficult living in the world. So we want to be reactive in certain kinds of ways, but not reactive in others. How do we discern the difference? Attention. We need to do that because we don't want to throw out reactivity. Oh my goodness, of course not. How would we act in the world? The question really becomes choosing. How do we discern the difference between being safe, as I said, talking to some people today, how do we discern the difference between being safe and discomfort? Sometimes I was saying today, it is not safe for women to walk at night. The poles with the emergency buttons. It's wisdom to recognize that. That discomfort needs to be acted upon. You are unsafe. And the discomfort actually is a measure of that lack of safety. Then there are other times in which you have discomfort that you can grow by moving into. Which is which? How will you know without cultivating a discernment? And if we live simply in a tiny world of just comfort, we will generate discomfort. It will be boring. It will be dead, and we will be depressed. Does that sound familiar to you? So it is not enough to say to our students, oh, move into your discomfort. Always move into your discomfort. That's crazy talk. You know, giant animal, 7-foot animal, orange stripes, big sharp teeth, move toward, your discomfort. Dumb. Eaten, right? So this is like, so we need to develop a particular kind of discernment and attention. These practices do that very thing. In addition, they develop and instill a deeper sense of the material that we are teaching our students. And how that occurs is through the students' examination of that material in the center of their own lives. So in my field in economics, I have the students think about their own behavior around the behavioral assumptions of the models that we're using. So students can interact with their own sense of what these models are suggesting and what the models are suggesting. It doesn't say that the models are right or wrong, but it has them form a deeper sense of the material they're reading. So not only can we develop a kind of abstract sense of attention, but the students can deepen their understanding of the material. So I just like to take a moment to stop, okay? Because I feel like I'm just yelling at you a lot. If you think about your own area, or the area that so you're not, you're here as out of interest, something that interests you. If you think for a moment, just something that what you find interesting, some subject, some area, some course, and start to recognize your own experience in relation to some aspect in abstract in that area. Like in my area, it might be like positional concerns. Like the idea is that, you all are interested in not only your absolute level of wealth or income, but how you are positional to others, relative to others. And if you tell students this and the models, these abstract models suggest in the utility functions, I talked about this with some other people the other day, that you are concerned about others, in a kind of negative way. Their gains are your losses, because you're kind of worried about how they're doing vis-a-vis you. Then you can easily think of others whom you might want to benefit, and their benefit actually is a joy to you. So actually working with students through exercises to have them recognize when they are competitive with others and when they are cooperative with others, has them realize that they create their own positional concerns. And if they can create their own positional concerns, that is to say, they create their own Joneses, they can cultivate changes with respect to that behavior. Or they can at least examine when it is they do one and when it is they do the other. What is the ground from which your benefit is actually a benefit to me? And this, of course, brings up the very nature of rivalrous goods in economics. So these practices can be used to stimulate a greater sense of understanding in the students themselves. Recently, I've been working with my first-year students on Nozick's experience machine. Some of you might know this. The idea that human beings, if you could replicate your experience fully, lying in a vat, and you could have any experience you wanted, would you go in the machine? And some of the students say, no. And then I'd say, why wouldn't you go in the machine? Well, it wouldn't feel, it wouldn't feel right. It's like, no. Feel just like now. And they come up, they come up with these reasons, but they're all experiential. They're all about themselves. And you get them to the place where it's kind of like, oh my goodness, I don't see why anyone wouldn't go in the machine. Because it's the same there as out here. In fact, how would we know we're in, blah, blah, blah. And then I asked them, okay, suppose that there was a button in front of you, and we can do this now. Suppose there's a button in front of you. I pull out these buttons, and this is the deal. These are I have special powers. And my powers are this: that I'm going to tell you what the button is for, and you're going to make a decision, okay? And whatever decision you make, you're going to actually enact that decision. But as soon as you do, you'll completely forget we did it. Okay? So in other words, you have a button in front of you now, and I say this. If you push the button, someone on the other side of the planet is cured of otherwise incurable disease. Okay? And the question is do you push the button or not? All right? And as soon as if you decide yes, you carry out the command of pushing the button. But then, after you do so, you're wondering, what is this button doing before me? If you decide no, you don't do anything, and you wonder, what's this button doing before me? So you have no experiential memory at all of saving the other person. Do you push the button? Now, if students say, of course I do, the question, of course, is, why would you do that? Because there's no experiential difference of pushing the button or not pushing the button. Now, you could say, well, instantaneously I get a hit from knowing I'm the kind of person, but you don't know you're the kind of person because you don't remember you did that. So what I'm trying to say is that this little example, this kind of thought experiment, can also be another kind of personal kind of example of a contemplative practice that has them realize, oh my goodness, maybe I don't do everything for my own experience. Maybe, just maybe, other people matter. Outside of my experience of them mattering. Because I get them to a place, they really can't think of any reason why they would do anything not for their own experience. Seriously. I just look at them and say, you're the scariest people I've ever been around. If you suddenly wanted to eat me and could get away with it, you'd just do it. Because like that's pretty scary. So these practices can be used to, really deepen the understanding of the material that you're working with. So they can be designed for this. They can cultivate a sense of empathy, compassion, connection to others. And people have shown this in a variety of ways. They support creativity and insight. These kinds of, looking deeply within oneself, insight arises. Like, oh wow, what is the ground I'm walking on? Wow, what is this about? The noticing can raise the sense of, how are we seeing this? When I'm drawing, how am I seeing? That's a ground of a kind of creative way to respond to my own drawing. So these practices can support creativity. It can be the ground from which creativity arises. And I think, extremely important, they can have students recognize contradiction and living within that contradiction. How do I, as someone who deeply believes in who believes in justice, has a sense of social justice, how do I live in a culture that I believe is racist? How do I do that? How do I do that? Or how do I recognize my own versions of that inside of not believing that? How do I, live with a sense of being a separate self and, having a sense of connection to all things? How do I have a sense of not being in control of my own thoughts and yet a sense of choice and free will? How do we do that? And these contemplative practices can be a ground for that, the holding of those contradictions and the living them out. Like what Arthur likes to say, living out that question. And then, this is the subversive element. These practices are subversive. Ooh, they're subversive. They really are. So you'll be fought. People will fight you for them. They won't want them. And that's probably wise in a kind of a way, because they are subversive. They are, in fact, personally and socially transformative. I believe that. They are personally transformative because students will quickly recognize, oh my goodness, these thoughts aren't mine. They just arise. And if your thoughts just arise, it's not a far recognition that your wants just arise. And if your wants just arise, and you have the program of satisfying your well-being by satisfying your wants, which just come willy-nilly, you can see that's not going to work very well. So it's actually personally quite confronting to recognize the nature of this consciousness. And this is something actually going down this road you should be aware of. Very quickly, some students will see this, and they will come to you very upset. If these thoughts are not mine, where are they coming from? I feel like a crazy person. I'm not joking. And being able to hold that, being able to help that, not in a kind of guru way, not in a therapist way, but in a kind of listening, holding, and then providing resources for that, so that they can personally, so this can be the ground for personal transformation. And then it's a ground for social transformation. This is a culture with a lot of pain and suffering. To actually have students open to that is painful. It's a painful process. But it's a process worth embarking on. It's a process that I believe these institutions really are built for. And that the individuals here are amazing individuals with incredible resources. And our students are simply amazing human beings. That, by the way, this is not for them, it's for us. It is a relational holding that we gain so much from each other, the contact of each other. It's not a download, right? It's an engaged process together where you know this if you do these practices. It's relational. And that relational process can be personally and socially transformative. And it's scary and difficult, but absolutely worthwhile. And that's what I really wanted to say. I can give you, it's such a weird space. I think we're all going to kind of end up in pools of protoplasm on the ground soon. So, we can, if you have some questions or you want to get up and run around the aisles for a while or wrestle or something like that, I don't know what would be useful right now. Because that's really, I can give you lots of examples, or what would you like to know now? That's what I really wanted to tell you. To sort of the theme, what contemplative practices can do, and my really exhortation to continue to work with this material in your lives, and as students, demand it. What is this? Seriously, not the kind of what does this have to do with the real world? Forget the real world. What does it have to do with me, and what my meaning, and other human beings that I'll be interacting with, the meaning that I can express in the world for others. That's really this could be that for you.
How does normal communication develop, and how does it go wrong? What's the technology we need to know to go out and be a therapist? And the kinds of things you bring up, I would love to have been able to somehow take time in courses and felt so driven by they have to know what sounds come first, what word combinations, what come first. It was a hard, I was practicing, but I couldn't get my practice into my class.
Yeah.
In this kind of way. So in that kind of content-oriented, people saying you have a license to 2 years old, how do you start to break that down so that other faculty will look at you and say, what the hell are you doing? You're going to pass this exam in 2 years.
Yeah, I hear you. Did you hear the question? Can you guys hear? So this is this witness in this web of more, better, faster. So much material done in this little period of time, and you really want to provide your students. Your students need this material to pass exams, to be competent in their area. This is really difficult. This is very, very difficult, and this is not this. You're not going to probably be happy with this, but like really to find creative ways to do this. Maybe little thought experiments, little ways in which they can take time to work on the material in ways that are didactic, and they are working on material, but ways that they might be able to interact with one another and find the ground for maybe the history comes out of a sense of a reflection, so that some of the material could be done outside of class. That's really that is pretty just information. Like these 5 things are the things you need to know. Why lecture that? Why go through these are the 5 things? So just and let your colleagues be your colleagues. I mean, you might say that's good for you. Say, yeah, well, my colleagues are econ people. I mean, I'll take your speech pathology. I'll raise you my econ people. You know what I mean? So it is difficult, and I don't mean to be churlish about it. This is hard because everyone's under this kind of pressure, and for our students to pass exams, to be competent with other. If you're teaching one section and there are 4 other sections, and they need to go on to the next class, and you didn't cover this, that, or the other thing, it's a problem. I recognize that. But there's a way in which we need to really push back on what's happening in this classroom, such that a lot of stuff can be done outside the classroom. To trust our students. Why? I'm not going to just tell you. I'm not going to go. If I'll tell you about the 5 things, value added, but not just go over the 5 things. I'm not going to do that. You do that outside of class. Read this material outside of class. What we're going to do is we're going to assume you've read that, and now do this exercise that incorporates these 5 things and see, from whence does the 5 things arise, and then motivate students out of a reflection of their reading, for example. So it's difficult, and I recognize that in certain areas it's really hard in the kind of complexity and the amount of stuff that you just have to do in terms of like a technical way. But it's worthwhile at least attempting.
What seems analogous to what somebody in IT would be faced with. You find a lot of people coming out and saying, I know something because I know this program.
Yeah.
But do they know why it's there, its architecture, why it's better than this, not better than that?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of issue. What's behind what you're doing?
Yes. And if you just think about an iPod. An iPod made somebody a lot of money. Almost none of it's built in the United States. But most of the money comes to the United States. Why? Because it was thought of here. Seriously. Most of the people, there's a great piece, and you might have seen it, about taking an iPod apart, all the pieces. Just very, 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 very few are made in the United States. But it's that concept, the idea. I mean, this is what the United States has. It is why we owe so many countries so much money, and they're not saying give it back right now, because we have generated these ideas and continue to do. When we stop doing that, it's a problem. That is a problem. So if we become just a technocratic culture, it's over. Not saying I'm not talking about Pax Americana, go USA, but rather just in terms of that. In terms of what we want to we want to cultivate with our students in the future of our society, we had better start thinking outside of this technocratic box. Otherwise, it's over. Oh, sorry.
How did you get into studying this topic?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I was going to quit being a teacher because I had lost all sense of meaning inside of it. I'm an economic historian, trained as an economic historian. My research in journals was being read by about 20 other people that looked a lot like me and had went to similar schools as I did, seriously, and they were interested in my work, but that's it. So it became narrower and narrower, and the work I was doing, difficult work, by the way. I was working hard on getting these papers published. Was narrower and narrower and narrow. And then in my interactions with students, I was just signaling for the labor market. That's all I was doing. writing difficult exams for very bright students to demonstrate they can do, they can work at a high level when they're told to. So that, which is not a bad thing. You want to do that? I hear you. I felt no meaning in that. Found no meaning in that. And I started looking for something else to do. Because I just didn't want to be signaling for the labor market. It didn't even matter what I was teaching. I was just creating flaming hoops at higher and higher levels for my students to leap through. And I had some great leapers. Amherst filters for the greatest leapers. They can leap, they can swivel and turn in the air. I became less and less interested in that. Instead, really had a crisis. So I called together all my friends. Not all my friends, but my dear friends. They came from Florida, California, from Maine. They came from all over the place. And we had spent a weekend together. Now, it turns out that Quakers had come up with this. It's a clearing committee. Like somebody said, oh, you had a clearing committee. I said, a what? That's a clearing committee. So it's kind of cool. So I reinvented the clearing committee. And they had these people sit around. And my first night, a really good friend of mine said, you don't have a problem. You have a situation. He said, you don't find meaning, right, in your work. Uh-huh. Well, what do you find meaning in? That's right. Okay. Live that out. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'll try. Can I do this? I didn't know how to do this. And that, it was the center. It was really the center. Like the Center for Contemplative Mind, I just heard about it. And really it felt like, oh my gosh, there are people who are developing practices. For me, it was in the classroom, right? In the classroom in create environments where people actually engage in a sense of meaning so they can live that out in the world. I'm in. And I'll give it a go. And it's still an experiment for me. I don't know if this, I'm kind of living it out. It seems like it's working, but it's still an experiment. And it's kind of working in a lived way. So that's really how. It really fell apart. It just fell apart. And then I started to think and then economics. I'm really serious. I'm in economics. I can't I can't do this stuff. I got models to teach. I got the axioms to go through. You know what I mean? I can't do that. But then it's kind of like, are you kidding me? The ground of economics is about demand. What's demand? It's wanting. Like a personal analysis of wanting. That seems, right up the alley, right? So it kind of reorients it. People think I've gone crazy. Some of my friends, some of my people I do in, if you ask people, some of my former colleagues in economic history, it's like he lost it. He's talking to people in a dark auditorium, like that. But then it really became involved with an incredible community. I don't go to my economic conferences anymore. When I go to economic conferences, everyone looks at your lapel to see where you're from, whether they're going to talk to you or not. You know what I mean? Like, where are you from? Like, you're from, some college that's not very famous. It's like, oh, forget about it. At our conferences, can you imagine that? It's ridiculous. At our conferences, it's like, who are you? And what do you do? It's like, oh, cool. You're starting a nonprofit. He's actually starting a nonprofit. Like, you're starting a nonprofit, and that? Tell me more. And then people who are very different traditions or are different from me, it's like, wow, challenge me. Like, let's, we're engaged in a common vision. So it's like this community was so different to me. In graduate school, I was trained as an assassin. You give a paper, my job is to tear your paper to shreds. I'm gonna try my very best to show you why you and everything you've done is wrong. Really. Now, it's guys that are kind of like, we're trying to find truth. No, I'm trying to bring you down. And whereas in this community, it's like, wow, you're doing that? Tell me more. How did your students deal with this? Or like, wow, that sounds so cool. It's more about like how, or if there's a challenge, like, wait a second, that sounds like you're proselytizing. There could be that kind of pushback, right? But it's about a common vision. It's about ending somewhere where we're trying to live out some meaning in the world. So it's like, it felt more and more of that I got more and more involved. And now, like watch out, because now I'm the director of this thing. So like if they'll, there's that kind of thing that happen too. That's how. What else would you like to know? Yes.
If we want to learn more about this, where should we go or what should we do?
Oh, the Center for Contemplative Mind is using the practices. If you see anything you're interested in, we could go through this kind of stuff if you want to. We could do. Okay, I'll answer your question. I'll pop back because there is something I want to do. There's Richie Davidson, beholding. There's probably a faster way to do this, but you can see the PowerPoint really fast now. Okay. This is what I was going to. Sure. Okay. The Contemplative Mind Society is an organization, a nonprofit organization, devoted to this work that we've been talking about. The website is there, contemplativemind.org. There's an academic, the Association for Contemplative Mind and Higher Education has about 450 members from every aspect of higher education. So inside and outside the classroom, every discipline, seriously every discipline. Give you examples in engineering, chemistry, poetry, economics, law, environmental science, political science, and nursing, every kind of discipline possible. Deans, nursing schools, whatever. We have the annual conference is coming up. It's November 8th and 10th at Amherst College this year. We have a summer contemplative pedagogy session, which is a week-long intensive. Some people here have done that. You can find out more about it. We have academic retreats. We have a program to provide grants for teaching and learning centers, or centers of academic excellence, or whatever you call them, that work across disciplines to establish programs for workshops or lectures to really talk. I've been talking about the broad thing. It's like, okay, now how would I do this in speech? How would I actually do this in speech pathology? Or how would I do it in the health sciences? Someone come in who's doing that work to give you examples of the kinds of things they've discovered. Or how do I maybe a seminar on, if I'm in a field that has a very tight group, like law school, people doing this in law school, right? They have some things to do before, for their tests. How do you work this in, like that kind of thing? E-newsletters, webinars, and you can contact me. You can contact Carrie Bergman, who's sitting right in front of you there, and and we'll be more than happy to help. Does that help? Is that good? Yeah. And we really kind of think of ourselves as kind of like a node for this. So you're interested in like, wow, who's doing this kind of work in social justice? Who's doing this in law? We can really help you. We can have a large number of people. We just started a journal. The first edition will be in December or so. It'll be out, so that's kind of cool. But I did want to just do one thing, if I may. I'm happy to get your questions. Sorry if this is giving you like a headache. I mentioned this today. I was on the campus of SUNY New Paltz. And I saw this poster. I was talking to someone, and I just stopped. Do you know, it says, who you are walking home with? Don't walk alone, and know you. So be afraid. Be very afraid. Be afraid when you're alone. Be afraid when you're with someone. Be afraid. If you're female, be afraid. Have I made myself clear? Be afraid. Now, you might think like that there is of course we live in a world in which that is not a joking matter. But I want to live in a world in which this poster says, when you are walking alone, do you know who you're walking with? That's the poster. And that's a world we can create. We can create a world in which women can walk at night. We can do that. And we start by recognizing the world in which half the population, simply by their own gender, cannot walk. My daughter, my daughter cannot walk out alone at night. That is unacceptable. That is simply unacceptable. And yet, we live in that world. And so and this, I believe, this work, we can do something about this. It's these institutions that can be the ground for a transformation, such that we will not. I'm not saying, by the way, don't hear me saying that this is inappropriate. This is appropriate. Yes, be afraid. I want my daughter not to walk out at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's dangerous for her. We live right near UMass Amherst, and women get attacked on weekends. So I want her to recognize that. But I want to also be working, engaged in ending that for now and for all time. There's no reason for that. And if those of you believe in evolutionary psychology, I will fight you. There is no reason that is the case. It's not acceptable, and we have to work. We have to be working, engaged, no matter what your area, to stop it. Not just because I have a lot of energy around this because of my daughter, but not just for this. All sorts of aspects of just unacceptable social injustice. It's unacceptable, and yet we live in acceptance. Now, I understand we can't change everything. But we can be working toward the errand, engaged in that errand. What do you plan to do? What do you plan to do with your wild and precious life? So that's what I'm saying. And this is the means. There's many, but this is one of the means. These contemplative practices can be the ground for this kind of transformation. It's enough to say, we need to change this. How? Let's start with emotional regulation. How about that? Yes?
What kind of feedback do you get from students who've done this? Do they realize what's happening to them? and how long have you been doing it? Have you heard back from people who've done it years ago or whatever?
Yes, really good question. Thank you for asking it. Let me do a two-part answer. This is an area we need a lot more research, especially longitudinal. So I have anecdotal evidence. In other words, I have evidence from students over 4 to 6 years longitudinal. I don't have this kind of work has been done for a good long time, and there are many examples of. I can give you examples but there's not a lot of rich research on the long run impacts. But I will tell you the impacts in classes and in successive classes are amazing. Students recognize that something transformative is happening. That they come up. This is all anecdotal. So I don't mean this to be kind of like this is not research based. I'm not doing conclusive interviews. But students will come up and say, the consumption class changed the way I view my major. The way I've had students, tell me that they've worked on addictions through this process, through the econ courses. They've started, they've changed their area. One student went on long run meditation retreats in India. It's sort of jettisoned the kind of area that they were going into and went back to that area, but it took 2 years to work on, did kind of work in India, working with women in rural areas before going to Wall Street, was where she was going to go. But this work kind of had her take a moment to think, do I really want to do that? And the answer was yes. That I didn't dissuade her from working on Wall Street, but she took a moment to stop. So it is, and certainly the sense of their engagement with the material. Absolutely. They see the richness with which they read, they're 18. They're reading Civilization and Its Discontents. This is complex, difficult work. And the engagement after they've come in with their confusion, and the kinds of conversations that elicit in their own lives, are really powerful. And this, there are lots of examples of this. So I found it to be, there's some students that are kind of like, I thought this was going to be new agey. And I can sort of see its purpose. There's that kind of response. But the evaluations that I give at the end of the course, you often show like this is, deeply engaging in a sense, and a real kind of, and it really, a sense of an examination of meaning. Now, how that plays out out into their life, that's a cool question, and I don't know. And of course, I'm not talking about small interventions, right? I'm really talking about just imagine if courses were like this, if their residential halls were like this, if we were all engaged together in this inquiry, it would be far more profound. So I only imagine that every once in a while, it has this impact. But it's it's a small intervention, and I believe it's planting seeds, right? That can. A physics professor came up to me in the gym and said, two students were in my seminar, seniors, and they were talking about your course, and the one was saying, I wish I was older. I wish I'd been older when I took that course, because I can see what he was talking about back then. So a lot of times in my first year course, they're putting their heads on the desk, saying my brain hurts. And I kind of go at them a little bit. I like to go at people a little bit. And they feel that. And so that class is a little much. But then they come back later and say, I understand what you're talking about. One student who hit my class last year has started a kind of what is Amherst group. She's going around interviewing people. And this is what she wants to know. She wants to interview everyone who's taken my course over the 4 years to see what kind of impacts it had on their lives. So I'll maybe give you more details on this. But it does have this richness. It has a richness not only for the students, but for me. Like the engagement in the class where students are engaged in their sense of meaning, and I'm witnessing that. It's so different from them learning this kind of thing that's been in a textbook for the last 20 years. So it really, it's an engaged sense. It really is. Yeah.
Do you ever have a chance to take these ideas outside of sort of kind of like a privileged setting or like a university student setting? And I feel like some of the times the best thinkers aren't always the best leaders. So do you ever have a chance to reach people who aren't intellectuals?
That's a really good question. I worked for a while doing kind of life skills, like a kind of like a facilitator of life skills in prison, which doesn't mean they're not intellectual, right? But they're outside of it. This is the privilege setting, the privilege setting, and it was different, and it was institutionally very challenging. And I stopped doing it. And it's a cool question. I don't hear it as I hear it as this is a cool, challenging question. I don't mean in a kind of in a pugilistic way, but in a kind of okay, I'm hearing what you're talking about in this environment. What about other environments? It's cool. Yeah, it's a cool question. And I found, this is not easy to say, but I found the prison environment, so difficult to work in, and the administrative constraints around what I could actually do in it, so constrictive, I stopped going in. I even had to call what we did conflict management. Because what I would do would not have flown. It's a crooked system. And to work in it, you gotta crook yourself. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Right.
I did for about 4 years. And worked with hundreds of men. I didn't work with women, I worked with men. And it's important work, and I haven't done a lot of it. I've done work inside, like meeting, like social activists working with people in higher education. And that's what I've been doing. And it's been challenging in this environment. And I'm hearing what you're saying, and I like it. And it will sit with me. I have a 4-hour ride now. That's what's so cool. Thank you for the question. And I'm getting, may you, work, inside and outside. Having seen that, my sense is you will. I hear you, and it's like it's cool. It's a cool thing. And the challenge of I feel right now my body temperature just changed. No, it totally is, and it's fear. This is like I can do this. I can show up here, and I can do this. I can tap dance through this. No offense, but I mean, you know what I mean. But what you're asking me to do, or not, you're asking me not to do anything. You just asked me a question. It's a beautiful question, and I appreciate it, and I'm holding it. So I hope you don't hear this as a lack of answer. I hear it like I'm holding that, and sorry.
So the fact that you're even receiving it and being open to it.
I receive it. I receive it.
Malik, you should tell him your practice.
Which, what?
The spreading love practice.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to
Yep. No. Nobody wants to hear his practice spreading love. It's boring. Spreading love. Boring.
Yeah, I mean, my spreading love practice kind of it works in a lot of ways, but maybe like the fundamental way is just through kind of breathing and intention breathing. I had talked about this in class today. But intention breathing and just kind of thinking about sending love not only to myself and the people that I know, but just to anything and everything. And I was talking about the idea that we as humans, we take in oxygen and put out carbon dioxide, and the plants, they take in oxygen. No, I'm sorry. They take in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen.
Yes.
So if we're breathing out that loving oxygen, they can take it in, right? And they can put it back out. So it's kind of just like this big cycle. And I don't know, just like being loving and caring towards everybody and everything, and even just myself. Like it's a daily practice and it's kind of tough to do, but like just approaching people with that, it kind of it spreads to one person and spreads to the other. So it kind of touches, everybody, not just the privileged, not just the unprivileged. It's everything as well.
Yes, I hear it. Yes, and in its kind of essence, that's what this is really about, right? It's like work living this out in the world in ways that are not just about us, and so you're creating that. So there are ways in which that we're doing just that. But then I heard a deeper call in your question. So I thank you for that. Yeah, beautiful practice. Thank you for doing it, because then I'm breathing in your loving air. Right now, your loving molecules are coming in and I'm coming back. Yeah, my loving, they're coming back at you. And a teacher would tell me, like, particularly, like he said, don't worry. Like if you're sad and feeling alone, someone somewhere is wishing you loving kindness. And that's true. There are people on this planet somewhere, wishing all beings loving kindness right now. So that practice has a deep, long, beautiful tradition that you're living out and you're breathing, and then this kind of respiration with the sense of plants, by the way, not just sentient beings, so-called, right? Who knows what the sentience of plants are? But you're doing it with respect to there's a living earth. Just imagine if we acted in this world as if it were alive and not already dead. It would be different. So thank you for your practice. Yeah.
Okay.
You've noted how these methods can like produce major changes in society, or they have the potential to at least. And I want to know, in your realistic opinion, how long, like, what's a time frame when these
Days.
changes could be
Days.
noticeable? Given
Oh, it depends. Like, for example, in one way, what he just said immediately affects me. So on some level, it's instantaneous. I'm not joking now, all the goofiness aside, instantaneous. In terms of systemic changes, it depends on the nature of them. It's an interconnected, monstrous web. So like major changes, like this not being there, I have to be able to imagine it, but I can't imagine it when, which is some of the hopelessness and the fear around my engagement with it. Because it's intolerable, and I don't know how it ends. So, like, in terms of a timeline, I don't have a plan. But I have a faith that this is the ground from which it arises. So yours is a really cool question. I can see why you're a math major. Dude, I hear what you're saying. How does this, by when? If I'm going to make you a promise, I promise you X. You're going to say, by when? That's good, right? Because if I say just I'm going to do it, if I'm going to do X, that's no promise. It's got to be a by when. I believe in this process because it incrementally opens in the direction I believe in. The ultimate change that I'm calling for, I don't see the plan for its fruition. But I see these actions as moving in that direction, an opening toward that practice. I see that practice opening toward this. I see it changing the way when I drive home. I drive home different. Seriously, I'm not making a joke now. We are doing. We have programs in our center. Anti-racist programs. We have we bring in facilitators who are working with us, challenge our community, and to think about access. We're doing that, but this is a call. This is a different kind of a call, and that affects me. And how that plays out in the world would depend on what I do with it. But it is an impact. You can feel it. So this is difficult to say. Transformation of my classes within 2 years. The impact on my students in a semester. Cultivate. You look like you're making a timeout. They need the room? So, and we know when the talk ends. So that's it.